I went to NYU right here in New York City, and back in 1999, people actually still looked at newspaper job ads. I can't imagine that any of you found your internships or your jobs that way, but that's actually how it worked. And ISE wasn't quite my first job, but I had spent my last year of high school in Queens and my years of college at NYU working at a couple of large corporate law firms. And I was studying economics and politics at NYU, and I was all set to go to law school. Now, I graduated school a little bit early, so having spent so many years at corporate law firms and having developed an enormous amount of respect for attorneys, I thought, oh my God, I really ought to try something else before I agreed to my parents' wishes and actually pursue law school. So opened up the newspaper, found a job. It wasn't the ISE, and that was probably one of the first lessons I learned. One of the hardest decisions I had to make in my very young professional career at that point was to leave. And I'll talk a little bit more about this as I speak to you guys, but it really just wasn't the right fit. And a big part of that was the culture. It wasn't even so much the work. It was looking around and realizing that this wasn't the right environment for my development. And that's a decision that many of you might be faced with. And there's no right or wrong feeling, and very often, sometimes the best decision is, in fact, to stay. Now, back in 1999, it was a little bit easier to get job interviews than I think it was today. This was before the dot-com bubble burst. And I will tell you, and this is not necessarily how it might work out for you, but even after leaving that particular role, there was not a doubt in my mind that I would have interviews lined up and that I would find another job within a few months. And whether it was idiotic or not, it actually did pan out that way. So I opened up Netscape, which is sort of the rotary phone of internet browsers, and NYU actually had started a website, or what at least passed for a website, and they had something called the NYU job line. And I found this cryptic ad for the ISE, the International Securities Exchange. And it was one of the interviews that I went to. And I went to this address on Wall Street, this tiny little bizarre-looking room with a couple of people there, maybe a half a dozen at that point. And I had already had another job offer in hand. And I met these people, and I really connected with them. I liked the other company as well. The disadvantage they had is they were in Queens. They were in Long Island City, right next to that lone skyscraper. And I thought, oh my God, if I go and work in this company in Queens, my mom will not let me move out. So I just wanted to tell you guys that that is a perfectly legitimate way of choosing your employment in case that's something that you are going to be faced with. So I worked for a startup. And in fact, nobody on the outside really knew what we were up to, and we were about to start the first all-electronic options exchange. And over the years, and I've been there for 16 years now, I did a little bit of everything. And starting out in marketing, working in technology, working in operations as a customer service representative, to then sales, and now I actually run the options business for the firm. And one of the first and most important lessons that you learn is about teamwork, customer service, especially when there's only a couple of other people around you. Now, we were starting an electronic options exchange, and we didn't actually anticipate that you'd need actual humans picking up the phones. But we did, and I was one of the first of those people back in the year 2000 when we actually launched. And we had this very rudimentary phone system where just the way it worked was unless I was on the phone already, nobody else would ever hear their phone ring. So I was on the phone all the time. We didn't have like one of those fancy turret systems that people have on trading desks or voice over IP phone systems or kind of a randomized thing. We literally had about 6 or 7 like office desk phones connected. And the only way I would ever get a break is if I literally took my phone off the hook and just left it. And that was the procedure number 1 if I wanted to go and pee. Because if I didn't do that, then my phone would ring and somebody would have to pick it up for me. And it became kind of a running joke because I was the one person that was always on the phone. And, early days of an exchange that was, up and down all the time, there were a lot of people yelling and very, very unhappy all the time. So it kind of became a running joke. So if I was ever off the phone and actually sat there and we were enjoying a few minutes of quiet, somebody would prank call me. And sometimes it was actually our clients that were put up by other people in the room just to call me. Sometimes it was people in the room using laptops. But after a while, I was wise to them. I knew what they were doing because the local extension came on, and I started answering the phone Pizza Hut whenever that happened. And so one day, and it was a particularly quiet day, my phone rings, and I see that it's an internal phone number. It looked like the reception desk or something. So I pick up the phone, and I say, Pizza Hut. And what I hear is, "Oh, that's very nice, Boris." And it was David Krell, our founder and CEO, calling from his office. I found out much later, after being told that, in fact, I was going to be allowed to keep my job, that what had happened is that a customer trying to reach us through our 800 number couldn't get through. They were probably misdialing for all I know, or maybe it was why it was so quiet in the room. But back then, small company, we were all starting out, they thought, well, I'm just going to call David Krell, the CEO, and my friend, who thought, well, I'm just going to check this out from my office with the entire senior management team because they were in a staff meeting. It took me a while to figure out how the entire company, for the longest time, knew that this has happened because I couldn't imagine that he would tell people. But apparently there were about 10 people in the room, and he had me on speakerphone. And that led me, because, the fact that customer service is incredibly important, both externally and internally, it seems kind of obvious. But perceptions matter. First impressions, second impressions. And the advice I would have for everyone starting out is that your first impression to the people in your organization, they matter quite a bit. And perception is reality. And sometimes, like in my case, it takes a little bit of time to repair an incident like that. It worked out, and everything's fine, but yeah, I probably would have liked to avoid that in the first place. Now, I mentioned I worked in a lot of different groups at the ISE, and this is not to say that it's an opportunity available to everybody. It's something I consider myself quite lucky to have found a place like the ISE. After all, I'm here 16 years to the day. Now, mind you, I was about 12 years old when I started there. I worked in marketing, as I said, market operations, technology, sales. And what I can tell you is that what allowed me to be successful was being able to learn as much as possible about the company that I was working at. And with the people that I work with today, the people that work on my team, and the people that I work with throughout the company, I try to always encourage everybody to learn as much as possible about what the people next to them do, what people do on other floors, because it really is the one true way that you can contribute in a greater way than you can simply being confined to your own area of expertise. Now, that's not to say that if you are a customer service or an operations or a marketing-focused individual that you can suddenly become a software engineer. That's not how it works. But that also doesn't mean that you can't learn about the technology that runs your business. And as you know, in our industry, and as you've heard from other speakers, technology is basic and inherent in everything that all of the firms on Wall Street and in finance do and provide to their customers. And the other important lesson, and I was fortunate enough to have started with the ISE as one of its first few employees. I was actually employee number 13, is culture. It's what led me to leave my very first job after only a few months on the job, and it's what encouraged me to stay with the ISE for as long as I have. I was fortunate, as I mentioned, to be able to help form that culture. And it's not so much the IC mentality. That's the word that we like to use to basically refer to the culture that we have. And it's nothing unusual. It's all about teamwork. It's about creating a conducive atmosphere where people work together, get along, seek each other out, and make each other successful. Stacy, I believe, mentioned earlier, she mentioned trying to make decisions that are good for the business, and that's incredibly true. And it's also true that those decisions tend to work out for you as well. Part of what allows that to happen is when people seek each other out, and especially as folks that are just starting out, as interns or whether it's your first job, you should be seeking others out within your company. Because not only will it expose you to the different opportunities available in your firms, not only will it help create those positive impressions that you really want to create, but it'll help you learn what the culture is, figure out for yourself if you fit into that culture, and help you make decisions as you grow within that company. And I'm not up here saying, well, I've been with the ISC for 16 years and that's the goal. It is absolutely not the goal. Sometimes the right decision is to leave. There are many people at the ISC today that have been there for more than 10 years. A lot of people on my team have been with the ISC for more than 10 years. I'd like to believe that the reason they stay is because of the culture that we've developed, because of the camaraderie and the general positive environment. But we've also had a lot of fantastic people choose to leave, partly because, even though we're part of a much larger company, Deutsche Börse, based in Germany, our team in New York is less than 200 people. There's not always going to be opportunities, no matter how fantastic or how capable the people are. And that could be a mistake as well, deciding to stay, not reaching your full potential. And I would encourage you guys to do that as well, if that's the right decision for you. Thanks, everyone. Good luck.